performance-enhancing drugs. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys. This is a nice turnout. And excellent. So I'm curious, how many of you address these types of issues in your patients on a regular basis? Yeah. And who can drive that conversation? Is it typically brought up by you, by the parents, by the kids? It's a one-way street. Yep. So commercial interests here. And so a lot of times when we think about these, right, traditionally we've always kind of thought about athletes at all levels of participation. But these days, a lot of use of these very same things are done by this. Right? So that age-old truism of teenagers who want to look good, and they want everybody else to know that they're looking good. And to drive home the point about the pertinence of this to a primary care practice, I offer up these numbers for your consideration. And so these numbers down here are based upon current national prevalence data for use of these different substances. And I don't know about you, but when I see numbers like this, right, especially this one on the bottom right here for the steroids, I'm thinking, right, who are these kids? Because a lot of them are obviously flying under the radar. And then really, what do we need to kind of be doing about it? And so these are the topics that I aim to cover today. But I want to make sure we've got our terminology straight. So traditionally, we've talked about performance-enhancing substances, including both supplements and drugs, primarily for athletic performance, but more recently, those stimulants being used for cognitive performance as well. But moving forward, you're going to see more and more these terms here. And really, the emphasis here is on the role that appearance kind of plays as a driver for adolescents and adults in making decisions about using these things. So using this stuff. Well, there are some kind of age-old kind of stereotypes that still hold. Boys tend to use muscle-building stuff more than girls. Girls tend to use weight loss stuff more than boys. This information here on sexual orientation is very robust. That's a very high-risk group, especially for anabolic steroid use. The data by race and ethnicity, a little less so. And the role that appearance plays, it is not surprising that folks who are kind of ending up not perfectly satisfied with how they are looking, so some body dysmorphia, confers a higher risk for use. And there are some behaviors that increase risk for use, and namely that middle one, the training in a commercial gym. So the vast majority of boys who end up using anabolic steroids have come to that through some adult contact they've made in a commercial gym. And this isn't Planet Fitness or your franchise gyms. It's those kind of small, kind of muscle head gyms where use of performance enhancers and anabolics is actually an expected norm. And finally, kind of that exposure to the appearance-focused kind of fitness media, right? So that's not your Sports Illustrated. That's kind of your six-pack ab magazines, the one that each cover looks the same month after month after month. Study that came out a couple years ago changed a lot of what we've thought about in terms of muscle-enhancing behavior in the pediatric population. And so this was done kind of in a Midwest metropolitan area. And those authors got an entire pediatrics article out of reporting out the results of this question here. So specifically, in order to increase the size and muscularity, what of these have you chosen to do? And what they found was this. The vast majority of kids have done some form of lifestyle change in pursuit of increased muscularity. And girls here almost as high as boys, which was surprising to a lot of people, and led a lot of folks to kind of surmise that kind of muscles for adolescent girls is the new skinny in terms of the desired phenotype. So it might be changing some of the risk behavior that we see kind of moving forward. The most common protein supplement that they saw in use was protein. That's kind of universal when you look at studies on this. And so if you had to kind of guess in terms of kind of risk of use of protein supplements by high school boys, what would you say? Yes? Ooh, very good. Awesome. Middle schoolers a little less so. so this muscle milk, pay attention to this because this product is going to come back later in the talk. So for girls are at about half the rate of boys. And in this particular study, they found that middle school girls used at higher rates than high school. There's no explanation for that, but they said they found it in multiple schools throughout the study, so it wasn't an isolated incident. I do use these things more than non-athletes do, but I would tell you that I think that's still a sizable minority of non-athletes that choose to take protein supplements. Now, if you take a protein supplement and you throw some added calories into it, you get a weight gainer. Weight gainers extremely popular, especially among adolescent boys. And what I want you to pay attention to is this number in the middle, the 600 to 1,000 calories per serving, super calories. And the manufacturers want you to take a couple servings a day. Well, most boys who choose to use this, they're interested in gaining weight, but they don't want to get fat. They want to gain muscle, right? But you can only put muscle at a certain rate. And for kind of this kind of mid-sized kid here, a couple pounds a week is the maximum he's going to be able to gain. And so if you want to gain 2 pounds of muscle in a week, you need to do all of these three things here. And with that number, in terms of the calories, that's about half the calories in one serving of a weight, let alone a couple servings. And so if they're taking it as directed, right, they're going to be gaining a lot more than muscle. They're actually going to be putting on more fat weight than muscle. And look at that kind of number at the top. Whoa. So how do I find it? It's actually a much better kind of match for these top two things up here than for this down here. So this Optimum Nutrition, that's the top-selling weight gainer on Amazon and bodybuilder.com. Supplements, I've been in this business long enough that I see these different amino acids kind of come and go. Currently, leucine is at the top of the list. The problem with amino acids is that you can get into some toxicity if you're kind of supplementing individual amino acids because they tend to come in pretty high doses. So about creatine, yeah? So there was creatine mentioned back there before. And so creatine is primarily a male phenomenon still, primarily seen kind of in the upper high school grades. And to understand creatine, let's just kind of go back to what it is. So all creatine is it's a fuel. And it's a fuel for this kind of phosphocreatine system that kind of happens with real high intensity activity in the first 30 seconds of exercise duration. So it's that red line going down. That's all creatine does. We all have a bit of creatine every day, but creatine is in the foods that we eat, and our body can make it from amino acids. And you can see here that if you've got a meat eater, chances are he's getting a pretty good dose of creatine just from his dietary sources. And the thing is that if you're getting all your creatine from your diet, your muscles are holding as much creatine as they possibly can. Taking additional creatine, there's no way you can kind of bump it up additionally, so a lot of it just kind of goes out in the urine and is wasted. Creatine is one of the most heavily studied supplements in terms of athletic performance, and it does have some benefit for some people in certain situations. So kind of going back to that mechanism of action, not surprising that it's that short duration, high intensity efforts. But the usual gains with creatine are kind of in that order of 3 to 5%. So take a 100-pound bench press and you get 103. Big whoop. Especially when you put it against these massive gains that young people are capable of making when they just get into a good resistance training program of a couple months duration. They're not going to notice that 3% improvement from creatine. So my take is kind of why bother, right? You're not going to get any added benefit over what you do from following best practice. The common side effect of creatine is a couple pound weight gain, and so the problem with that is that when they start taking it, they feel they're building muscle, but it's really just water that they're kind of bringing on. And creatine actually appears to be a significant gateway drug for kind of pushing down the path towards other kind of more dangerous anabolic agents. And especially see a middle schooler made the choice to use creatine, and a lot of times at that age it is parent-driven as much as kid-driven. That's a kid who's at very high risk for subsequent anabolic steroid use. Don't overstate the dangers of creatine. This is kind of where we lose some of our credibility because it's been used for a couple decades now at these super high doses, and we used to be kind of concerned about kind of kidney issues and rhabdomyolysis. None of that kind of panned out. And so kind of the main kind of marker against creatine isn't so much the danger of creatine, but it's just the lack of efficacy, especially in this developing pediatric population. We'll talk about supplements in a little bit and some of the concerns with creatine sold as a supplement. Caffeine, most kids get some form of caffeine, most every day, and the amount is kind of driven by their beverage choice primarily. I'm not so concerned about that, but I do get very concerned when you wrap caffeine and other stimulants, sometimes at super high doses, and you put them on the shelves as a loss or what they call a thermogenic aid. And high school girls, about 1 in 10 girls, have experimented with these at some point. Caffeine is performance enhancing even at fairly low doses, so that 1 to 3 mg per kg. You know, a cup of coffee has 100 mg on up of caffeine, so it's pretty easy to get to that. But again, when you look at the magnitude of improvement, even among those who are responders, it's small. It's in those low kind of single digits. And again, that comes in the wash when you're training younger athletes. Other stimulants, so diversion of ADHD meds. Do you guys find that you're coming across that issue frequently? Not so much. Well, graders, by the time they get to 12th grade, 1 in 8, the national statistics, have participated in diverted use of an ADHD med, usually either Ritalin or Adderall. By the time they get into college, among college students, that number goes up to 35%. And the usual intent of use are kind of these 3 things down here. But the cruel irony is that, so use of diverted stimulants is actually negatively correlated with academic performance. It's not associated with successful long-term weight reduction or improved athletic performance. So the rationale for using those things really doesn't kind of pan out when you look at the final result. So most kind of pediatric providers kind of know these side effects and safety issues with stimulants, so I put that up there primarily for completeness sake. On to another drug class, so these are the anabolic agents. So anabolic steroids, as long as I've been in this business, reported rate of use among high schoolers is kind of that 5 to 7%. The anabolic pro-hormones, so kind of that androstenedione that used to be so popular in baseball, those have really kind of fallen out of favor, and you really don't see much use of that anymore, at least adolescents. The thing with anabolic steroids is that there's like a ton of options that are out there, and they are often taken in these kind of fairly complex regimens called stacks that include kind of multiple anabolic agents as well as kind of anti-estrogen agents and other blockers to kind of prevent some of the adverse side effects. They're usually taken in these kind of on-off cycles of 6 to 12 weeks duration. And with anabolic steroids is that, so this is one of the performance-enhancing agents that is truly dangerous, and chances are, by the time the patient has made the decision to use something like this, they probably know a heck of a lot more about the specifics of what they're going to take than you and I will ever know. So that there's that knowledge imbalance that can be a little intimidating when we're in the office with them. Anabolic steroids are extremely effective at building muscle. They do a better job if you exercise along taking it, but even if you go home and sit on the sofa, you're going to put on some muscle mass. And so when we go through kind of training, these are the risks that we kind of focus on, especially in the media, right? They all talk about liver, and heart. But these aren't the risks that our parents, that our adolescents are concerned about. They're more concerned about this stuff here. And these are the things that are more likely to drive them into the office, things you're more likely to notice when you do your evaluation. So the acne, so they call it the acne, be extremely severe. The gynecomastia, right, so they call it the man boobs. Oftentimes they're using some form of estrogen blockers to try to prevent that. Chances are they're getting it from an adult source or the internet, and they don't know about this down here. So if you want to tell them something about anabolic agents they don't know, talk about the physeal closure, because if they're 15, 16 years old and they still have some linear growth ahead, they're going to cheat themselves out of it if they expose their growth plates to an anabolic agent. The selective androgen receptor modulators, I've had a couple of questions on these over the past couple months from some of the primary care docs. These have been studied for, 10, 15 years, and they're not on the market yet. They're designed primarily to increase anabolic kind of bone and muscle building effects and decrease the androgenic side effects. They've been studied as potential treatment primarily in kind of diseases of older age, so prostate cancer, low testosterone, that type of thing. And so like I said, they haven't been approved for therapeutic use, but one of them did find its way into the supplement market until it was taken off a couple of years ago. And there really are undetermined effects on athletic performance. These are still kind of understudied in terms of that. So there's just to kind of throw out there for you to know. So the nitric oxide or the NOx boosters, so those are vasodilators. When you work out with those, you get this fabulous muscle pump and you feel like you're working really hard and getting really strong, but really there's no benefit in terms of actual muscle building and performance. Human hormone. So I'm kind of surprised when I see kind of this rate of use of human growth hormones, say over 10%, in what's recognized as a pretty accurate study. The thing that's different between human growth hormone and anabolic agents is that the majority of these are kids reporting for the single episode of use. Human growth hormone's expensive. I think a lot of them, they take it, they don't get the desired effect, and so they decide not to use it again. You say the same for some baseball players at the highest level, Paul. And they're supposedly using it primarily for kind of recovery from injury and kind of recovery from training, which kind of takes a hit as we get older. A variety of side effects there, and again, these irreversible ones that are particularly problematic in a young population are shown below. Okay. So why should we care? So first of all, in terms of the supplements, right? So protein isn't dangerous, creatine isn't dangerous, but they're sold as dietary supplements. And most of our families aren't aware that those supplements that are on the store shelves at Hannaford, right next to the food and right next to over-the-counter drugs, not regulated like those are. There's very little FDA oversight in terms of how those things are made and sold. And 2 years ago, so the New York Attorney General did a study. They did an independent analysis of supplements that were sold at these 4 major retailers, and they found that 80% of the products they tested did have active ingredients. So this isn't stuff kind of off the internet. This is stuff that are in our stores kind of in and day out. So the product I was talking about earlier, muscle milk, really popular protein supplement among young kids. And when you go to the coolers at the front of Hannaford, it's sitting right next to the tea and the Diet Coke. So you can see they've been misbehaving. The FDA is kind of onto them. And when they've looked at purity studies of this product routinely ends up at the highest levels in terms of heavy metal contaminants, so cadmium, lead, mercury. But contamination is almost universal in protein supplements. A lot of times it's super low. I don't know if it has to do with the extraction process. I mean, certain manufacturers aren't purpose putting heavy metals in, but most of them are low, but some of them get high. And I think you could make a good case that in a pediatric population, there's really no safe level of ingestion for cadmium, mercury, or lead. Anabolic agents find their way into protein supplements, and actually over half of tested creatine supplements by the anti-doping agency tested positive for anabolic agents. So if you've got, a family that is found and determined to start taking some of these supplements, just make sure it's a buyer beware situation. And there used to be some good kind of internet resources, so supplementwatch.org, in terms of kind of looking at agencies that did some kind of purity testing. There's a couple of them now. They're all kind of subscription. You have to kind of buy into it. And then the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency does have a high-risk list of supplements that have been shown to have high rates of impurity, but it's not comprehensive by any means. In terms of drugs, now we've done a pretty good job of educating our families about kind of the legal consequences of version of our opiates, right? But anabolic agents and stimulants, those are scheduled drugs as well. And a lot of families don't understand that the legal consequences are the same for diversion of these things here as it is for opiates. So what do we do about it? Well, first of all, recognize your opportunity to address this, yeah? So our pre-participation evaluation, so we'd all be using the 4th edition monograph. If you don't know where to get it, there's a free copy of the form on the aap.org website. And they ask a number of questions really specific to use of performance-enhancing agents, and then there's other questions in there as well on body dissatisfaction, again, kind of pointing to that risk factor. Problem office visits, so check for visits where performance-enhancing agents might be playing into this, right? So anxiety and headaches, so that's often comes along with kind of stimulant use, right? Those caffeine withdrawal headaches. Acne, again, especially acne that's resistant to the usual treatment. You got to be thinking about anabolic agents. And this is also a topic that really lends itself to kind of social discussion, right? It comes in out of the news from time to time. It's the type of thing that is very reasonable to discuss on the sidelines. I know a lot of us are kind of involved in our kids' youth sports activities, and so that's a good place to kind of spread the word as well. When we're talking about use of performance-enhancing agents, it's different than use of other substances of abuse because this is goal-directed, and you need a completely different approach than what you use for kind of drugs of recreation. And the thing about use of performance enhancers is the carrot is the potential benefit, right? And so that's what's driving these kids to make the decision to use performance-enhancing agents. The factors, right, the negative consequences really play into the equation. And so if you're going to be effective in addressing this in the office, you really have to focus on the lack of benefit of these things rather than kind of walking down the path of kind of danger and legal consequences. That to realize they're going to be skeptical because you're telling them something very different than what they're seeing in the media, what they're hearing from their coaches and their peers. And one way, I don't know if any of you guys do this. Do any of you do this ask, tell, ask approach at all? It's a good way to kind of address an issue where you've got a patient who's sitting there and they're thinking that they know way more about the topic than you do. And so you can start off by saying, hey, do you mind if I tell you a couple concerns that I have about your use of creatine? And you kind of share your information, so one or two of the most salient points for that particular patient. And then you ask the follow-up question. And it's a very nice kind of non-judgmental, non-preachy way to really get your point across. And it's awkward the first couple of times you use it, fair warning, but after you've done it a couple of times, it really kind of flows quite nicely. So when we're talking about these in patients, I find it's really helpful to take a developmental viewpoint. So on the x-axis here is age in years. On the y-axis here is the growth rate in centimeters per year. And so these kind of is the usual tempo that these guys go through. And the two kind of times of development that you want to identify, one is this time of kind of height takeoff here, where they kind of start to go up into that growth spurt. And the other important time to identify is kind of peak height velocity here. And so the trouble with peak height velocity is you don't know you were there until it's over, right? But peak height takeoff is pretty easy to figure out. And the reason why peak height velocity is so important is that it is the holy grail of muscular and athletic development. There is no other time in your life that you will get as quick and as much improvement in all these athletic parameters all at the same time. And this is all nature, right? These are expected and physiologic gains. So if I got a kid who comes in and they're asking about these things and he hasn't even started his growth spurt yet, he wants something that's going to help him speed up time, and we can't do that. So it's important to emphasize the lack of effect, again, from supplement, even from training at this age group. They're not going to be able to kind of get into the type of gains that they want until they kind of start to enter early puberty. And one thing that's helpful to emphasize is that this is kind of where they're setting their foundation for future athletic performance. And so variety of motor inputs and variety of motor outputs is key. Athlete specialization at this stage is inappropriate. Your lacrosse playing makes you a better hockey player. And so emphasizing kind of the variety, emphasizing the fundamentals in terms of kind of creating a good foundation for when adolescence finally does occur. So around the time of kind of peak height velocity, so for better or worse, this is where kids get some kind of view into kind of what their athlete potential is, and they may or may not like where they land. This also correlates with the time of increased supplement use. So don't let your patients think that all of these gains that they're making are due to the supplements. these would have happened with or without the supplements. Those supplements are incidental to the way changes that nature was providing you. Road, so late adolescence, their rate of improvement is going to decelerate, so they might find that to be a little frustrating, especially if you've got somebody in late high school who kind of wants to play at that next level, right? They either want to play at college or maybe they've been accepted and they've been told that they need to put on pounds, get a little bit stronger. They're going to be very tempted by use of performance-enhancing agents if they've got kind of those goals dangling before them. And so if we're going to kind of try to steer these guys away from performance enhancers, I think it's important that we kind of recognize the underlying goals that they have and to give them an alternative way to achieve them, right? So I think we need to give them a yes message. And these three kind of points here, so these are the fundamentals, yeah? If you have these, no supplements are going to get you where you want to go. And if you do have these, you don't need the supplements. You're going to get as good as nature's going to allow you. I find that this last point down here in terms of kind of rest and recovery is highly overlooked. I think we need to be emphasizing that more with our young athletes. Find that most families and kids in the office will actually tend to want a little more information about that first point up there, the nutrition. So I want to give you a couple pearls to put in your pocket. So they're probably not thinking about carbohydrates, but they should. So most people know that carbs serve as an energy source, but it also protects muscle. If you leave the house for school or you go to your athlete practice and you don't have enough carbohydrates, your body's going to break down that muscle as a fuel source, and that would be a shame. Most of our kids, at least in scholastic sports, are kind of training every day, back-to-back days. The most important time for them to kind of get fuel for tomorrow's workout is if they take in some carbohydrate really as soon as possible, literally within the first 20 or 30 minutes after workout. Glycogen deposition is much better if you can get carbs in early after a workout. And again, that's your fuel source that'll take you into the workout the next day. For protein, so chances are this is where a lot of their questions lie. Contrary to what I learned in medical school, athletes do have higher protein requirements than athletes, and this is over and above the increased protein requirement for growth and development in our adolescents. But if you do the math here, yeah, so 150 pounds, about 115 grams of protein per day. Most meat eaters, especially if they're kind of getting in enough dairy and a nice kind of varied diet, they're going to do just fine. Remember, these 3-ounce servings aren't reality for most people, right? Most restaurant, most home servings are considerably more than that. Got a vegetarian, it might be more difficult for them to meet that. They're going to have to think about it. If you have a vegan, it is extremely difficult. And I have a really low threshold for sending kind of serious vegetarian and vegan athletes out to the nutritionist to get added information. But they have to be organized if they're going to try to do it. Just like creatine, there is no benefit to more protein than that for your body to use. You can't prime the pump, so to say. But the timing of the protein, so this kind of concept of nutrient timing, which is kind of gathering some momentum, is probably more important than we previously thought. So especially like day after a hard workout, you want to kind of provide your body with kind of boluses of 10 to 20 grams of protein every 2 to 3 hours, right? You want a nice variety of amino acids in the bloodstream kind of all day long, so your body can kind of shop from the bloodstream for the amino acids it needs to kind of build up that muscle that you broke down with the workout. So for parents, so just like kind of any of the kind of more risk behaviors in adolescence, getting involved and staying connected, very challenging, easier said than done. But especially if they've got kids on sports teams or going into those commercial gyms, find out what the social milieu is there. What is the paradigm in terms of the messaging they're getting regarding use of anabolic agents and other performance enhancers? This is one area where news stories come out on these things a couple times a year. That's a fabulous kind of starting point, right? You're just kind of covering current events. And don't wait until your kids are in adolescence to address this stuff, right? Early grade schoolers, they have a tremendous sense of kind of fair play, right? They want everything to be fair. And kind of breaking out these news stories of athletes who might be kind of cheating the system is a good way to kind of get them thinking about this stuff in the right light. Be knowledgeable about performance-enhancing agents. That is a challenge because this field just moves forward kind of on a whim. So I'm going to give you a couple resources to kind of help both your families and yourself stay current. You don't need to know everything, but it's good to know where to send people to get the information that they should have. And then certainly, if this is an area of interest, encourage them to engage you specifically, or if you have questions and you don't know where to get the info, just call up one of us over in sports medicine, and we'd be kind of happy to point you in the right path. There we go, sources. Coming to the end here. So the performance-enhancing clinical report came out last summer. We aim to make this as user-friendly as possible, so there's a bunch of charts in there, there's some figures to give you information that we wanted to be as practical as possible to use for your families. This is available kind of free, full text online. Just kind of Google the title there, you can name in it, and it should pop right up. Second, anybody aware of kind of these Cognito virtual conversations as a source for CME? So I would highly encourage you to go on this website. So these are all products that were developed by the AAP. So this artificial perfection, which is the one pertinent to performance-enhancing agents, was done in conjunction with the FDA. This is a high-yield, kind of pain-free way to get some good information. It's kind of spoon-fed to you, and it's a good way to kind of engage in these different conversations, kind of experiment with different approaches to this using these avatars, so the clinician, the parent, and the kid. There are also programs for substance abuse for adolescents, for general mental health issues, and there's a program called Change Talk from Cognito, which deals with obesity, and they're all extremely well done. I was kind of technically hesitant is kind of my baseline, but once I got into this, it found it to be extremely helpful. Kind of go at the nutrition perspective, so you got a family highly interested specifically in a good nutrition supplement and training overview. You can steer them, and this is actually written for clinicians, but it's very accessible for most parents. It's a joint position statement. Again, you can get it free, full text online, and that was put out by the nutritionists, or the dietitians rather, in the American College of Sports Medicine. That's somebody who's asked you about a supplement that maybe you've never heard of or you have no idea about, this is the place to go. So the British Journal of Sports Medicine published a series of articles, extremely comprehensive. They're definitely written for the clinician, but I've never come across a supplement that I've seen or heard of that was not included in this series. So you've got somebody who's like, just the facts, ma'am, they just want the basics. This healthychildren.org website is good. They can click on sports, and there's a variety of sport-related topics, including several on both general and specific topics regarding performance enhancement. Family who's a little more savvy, they want something kind of a little more in-depth. These are awesome. So USADA put out these are PDFs that can be downloaded free, no charge. The True Sport Parent Handbook covers a lot of kind of general sports parenting topics. More pertinent to what we are talking about here today is this True Sport Nutrition Guide, and they're awesome. They're excellent. If you're a kid who's maybe thinking about or where you're concerned that they might be at risk for use of anabolic agents, this Taylor Hooten Foundation. So Taylor Hooten was a Texas teenager who, early in his high school football career, made the decision to start to use anabolic steroids. His parents were very concerned about these changes that they saw in him. They took him to multiple physicians, none of whom recognized use of anabolic steroids. Ended up taking him then to a mental health professional who did recognize it and recommended that he stop anabolic steroids cold turkey. If you stop anabolic steroids cold turkey, the depression that comes on is extreme, and he ended up committing suicide. And so this guy's father, Don Hooten, he put together this Taylor Hooten Foundation. He's made it his mission to really educate both families as well as healthcare providers about the risks, not only of anabolic agents, but really of other performance enhancers. If you check on this education link up there, they've got some really nice handouts, some really nice kind of posters that are appropriate for hanging on walls in the office, that type of thing. Take-home messages. Muscle-enhancing activity is very common in adolescents, both boys and girls. Remember, commonly stimulants are used both for weight loss and cognitive enhancement, but really for not, because it's not effective. Most ergogenic aids are without significant performance benefit in athletes, and there is really no substitute, right, for the fundamentals of good nutrition, good training, good recovery. And that is it. Thank you. So are there any questions from either here, or can I take questions from either Yarmouth or Foden?
When do they tackle the task of regulating these supplements?
They will not regulate the supplements until Orrin Hatch leaves the Senate. So the dynamic that has developed is, so for season, I'm not sure why John McCain has kind of taken this on, but every couple of years, John McCain, and he'll enlist others. I think typically it's somebody from Connecticut, I can't remember the name, and they will kind of put together something about enhancing governmental oversight of the FDA, and then it goes into committee, and then Orrin Hatch, who is apparently in the supplement industry's pocket, kills it in committee. So the thinking at the AP, because the AP was part of that, is that until that dynamic changes, I mean, nothing's getting done in Washington these days anyway, and the paradigm, right, is to decrease regulation, so it's going to happen soon, but there's one senator who has a lot of power who is really kind of keeping the tamp on that. Good. Anything? Thanks so much for your attention. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks.